So hi Zoe, thanks for joining us.
Hi.
I thought I'd just start off by asking you just for a bit of background on your career to date and maybe how you fell into the procurement profession as well.
Yeah, sure. So I been working in procurement for about 7 years. So after I graduated from uni, I did an accounting degree. I started in Transport New South Wales. There's a procurement shared services team, and they do half procurement function, half accounts payable. So I guess by leveraging that accounting degree, that's how I got into procurement without actually knowing what procurement means. But that's how I started. So I was there for a year, and then I started at IAG as a graduate in strategic sourcing. I was at IAG for 2.5 years, then I went back to public sector. I was at New South Wales Treasury for 2 years, and about 2 years ago, I then came back to private, so now I'm at Westpac.
Right. And so I guess coming into procurement, obviously in Australia we don't have a specific procurement undergraduate degree.
Yeah.
What's something you've noticed about the kind of disciplines that are useful and skills and attributes that can be used in a procurement role? And also maybe something about your external training as well and your journey through getting your MSIPs.
Yeah, so I think that procurement is such a broad concept, and as I said, there isn't any degree to teach you what it is all about. And that's actually one of the reasons why I started studying towards MSIPs, because that's the only systematic way that I know that can teach you what procurement is all about. Through working experience as well, you have to be able to obviously communicate effectively, influence your stakeholders, and be able to understand data, analytical skills. But none of those is a skill that a degree can teach you. Same as, I guess, anything else in the business world. So I think that's why I studied MSIPs, and even just through reading the textbooks, you do pick up the framework, the fundamental principles of how you actually apply those skills, and soft skills is just pick up through the actual working experience. Yeah.
And I guess you've worked across kind of multiple public sector and private sector organisations. Do you have any observations about some of the similarities, some of the differences and comparisons between the two?
Yeah, so in terms of similarity, I guess, again, going back to the fundamental principles about how you run a sourcing event, how you manage your vendor relationship, manager concepts, the principles are the same. But in terms of difference, I think when I was at public sector, you have a lot of policies and restrictions, and for example, we have to go out to tender for a certain value. But in the commercial world, in the private sector, you can be more strategic to think about, does it actually make sense? And you do what's the most sensible way and the best sourcing approach. So you have more freedom to do what makes the most commercial sense. So I think that's the difference between private and public in general.
Yeah. And maybe any similarities or differences between different organisations, again, not just public and private sector, but maybe different strategies across different organisations?
Yeah, so I think I mainly worked in so IAG and Westpac are both in financial services industry. So I think the difference between different companies is the core capability and the core services that you actually sell. So that basically flows through the procurement category you manage. We have at Westpac, we have a lot of banking specific categories, and when I was at IAG, we have a lot of direct procurement categories that only relate to the insurance industry. I guess food services, Compass, and those companies will have, fresh categories, and I think just the categories are different.
And have you seen, we've talked a lot there's been a lot of talk around innovation and new technology as well and how it's developing the procurement profession.
Yeah.
Are there any observations you've made about how different systems have been used, how it's been improving, what's changing in the profession as well?
Yeah, I think people start to realise how technology is the foundation of innovation in everything that we do. So even through learning SIPS, right now I know that SIPS has new curriculums about blockchain, machine learning, AI, and all of those new technology. I think even with Westpac, we just announced our annual results, and our CEO is just published a new strategy for the next 5 years, and we partner with a technology company based in the UK, so that's all public available information on LinkedIn. So I think with either public or private sectors, companies starting to realise that you have to build that technology infrastructure right, and then innovation will flow through that.
And do you see any trends just generally around procurement and where it's going and what you see for the future in procurement?
I think there's been a lot of talk about machine learning replacing some things that we do, but those are the less strategic functions of procurement. Is the administrative task that you do. You can automate your tender process, you can automate your contract management process, but the machine learning can't actually replace strategic thinking behind all that. I think in terms of procurement, moving forward, we would want to utilise more digitized process, and then we would want to utilise platforms such as Salesforce, Oracle, they all Coupa, they all have procurement focused platform that built for this profession. I think more and more companies will start using those platforms if they haven't already.
Yeah. And with your studies as well, what kind of motivated you to pursue further study, and are there any advantages you can see in getting procurement specific training or just in general?
Yeah, definitely. I think what motivated me is so coming from a accounting and finance background, and without knowing much about procurement to start your career with, you always, you felt like a fraud, and you wanted to know, is there anything else that I can do to learn more about procurement? And that's how I started MSIP's journey. And I do feel like, I think instead of asking yourself, why should you do it, the right question is like, why not? Because there's a qualification out there, and there's a lot contents that you can learn about your profession. So if you actually take your career seriously, then the question is, why shouldn't you do it? I do feel like the 4 letters MSIPS on your resume explains a lot about your motivation, your ambition, your technical capability and knowledge. Apart from that, what is the most valuable aspect for me is that by having that knowledge to back you up, when at work that you feel more confident, you have the courage to take on a more complex project, and you know that I have the skills to back me up, I actually know what to do. So I think that's the most valuable aspect of it.
Right. And I guess being a young professional yourself, what would your advice be to somebody who was looking at going into procurement or looking at starting their career out in procurement?
I think definitely be part of the network and try to know more people who can be either your mentor or give you advice about the right industry for you, the categories that you can learn from more experienced people. So be part of the SIPS network definitely helps, and I definitely would recommend anyone who want to pursue a career in procurement to at least start learning about, start at a diploma level, learning about what is this all about. At the end of it, you might think, well, this is not for me, or you might think that I'm actually passionate about what procurement is all about, and also be part of the MSIPS or even the just a network. You have access to a lot of knowledge. They have articles, case study, and all the network events that you get to go to make friends and to network with other people who are in the same field. So I think that face-to-face conversation is invaluable as well.
And I just I guess as a final comment as well, are there any leaders or role models or mentors in procurement who have really stood out to you?
Yeah, so at Westpac, within my team, we have a new CPO. So her name is Coretta. So being a female leader within the organisation, and I feel like from the time when she started, just the way that she handles different situations and the way that how she see how procurement can change the world and solve all these problems that we have, and see procurement being a strategic function. And I do see her as a role model. So I can appreciate how that passion could lead to change and to lead to how you actually build the future.
And it's good to see people in the industry who are in places where you'd want to be as well and can see it reflected.
Yeah, definitely.